And just to follow up, and The Taxi Driver was written by Paul Schrader, but directed by Martin Scorsese. I don't know if Scorsese added anything into the script or not. Only Paul Schrader would know. I would assume probably not. We're about to approach the bridge up here.
YouTube Spivey. Yeah, man.
Because I looked over some of the footage and I said Martin Scorsese wrote. I meant to say Martin Scorsese directed Taxi Driver, but it was written by Paul Schrader, UCLA. It came out weird. UCLA grad. I actually tried to get into UCLA. I only got into the New School, which was in New York, but I was out in Hollywood and I auditioned for UCLA, which is pretty much right there in Hollywood. And I would have probably gone, I'd rather have gone probably to UCLA, but the New School probably had some stuff to offer, especially the Actor Studio. They had things to offer, and it's political, you know, it's a weird business. But like I said, Martin Scorsese directed Taxi Driver. Paul Schrader was the screenplay writer. He was the writer of it, and that brought in probably the all-time, I'm gonna get this, brought in the most influential movie of the 70s was Taxi Driver, probably one of the most shocking movies of that time, and the most important movie that we have coming out of New York when it comes to that style of realism and acting and cinematic mastery, I don't know, cinematic masterful filmmaking, you know, cinematic genius. Okay, Taxi Driver is probably, I would say, all-time best movie ever made, of maybe top 5 movies of all time, including Citizen Kane. It's right on the level of Citizen Kane. Taxi Driver is on the same level as that. You got Citizen Kane, you got Ingmar Bergman's Seventh Seal, you've got, you know, all-time movies, you know, maybe Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, you know. You got another film probably at the same level, you know, I don't know. I mean, I'm talking about all-time movies over a period of 100 years. Taxi Driver is right there in the top 5 in my book, you know, in my book review. But Born on the 4th of July, even though we're finishing up the Born on the 4th of July thing, Oliver Stone did work with many people to throw that movie together. Great actors. I mean, Tom Cruise, of course, is the star, but it took a lot of people to put that film together. Every movie that's ever made, you have to be grateful to everybody. The lighting people, the makeup, the directors, the actors, the background artists, you know, the extras, whatever you want to call them. Everybody helps make the movie, all right? So when you participate in a movie, you're part of that masterful work. And I have helped make many movies in Hollywood, and I did live there, and I did work with important people, including Simone from Pee Wee Herman's Big Adventure. She helped me do a lot of that. But so that's Diane Salinger. So what I'm trying to say is that movies are usually not made just by one person. It's an ensemble effort, just like a play, but you have to be respectful to everybody. But that, I hope you enjoyed the filming location of Born on the 4th of July. I'm headed to the Speedway to drop food at your doorstep. Okay, to follow up on some mistakes, at Texas Wesleyan, we did Strut Your Stuff. Stepping Out was a play they did later on. So Strut Your Stuff was what we did as a Strut Your Stuff showcase of talent. And that's when I met Miriam, and she introduced me to 7 plays by Sam Shepard. Or no, I don't remember which one it was. It was the one with Red Cross. So if you look, Sam Shepard has several books of plays. It was the book of play that has a Red Cross. So it's a collection of plays that looks like it's book form. Collection of plays. But it was Sam Shepard's play called Red Cross, which is a 1-act. And Miriam, of course, played the female part, and I played the therapist guy or whatever. You got to read it. It's a real weird play. It's great. It's a great play. It's great. It works. Strange is a better word. But we did that and got really great feedback from it. It was a really wonderful play. Sam Shepard was a great writer. But the reason why I said that is because the event that we did it under was called Strut Your Stuff, which was basically a showcase of plays. And it was one of the plays that I chose to do. And when I picked up Sam Shepard's play, Red Cross, and I started reading it, I totally saw the style of writing that I was starting to work with. It almost felt like, for a moment when I was reading it, it felt like I was reading something that I would have written. I know it sounds crazy, but I later on would direct Action, which is a Sam Shepard piece, Sam Shepard 1-act at UNT, and we got great feedback on that and everything. And I felt very comfortable directing Sam Shepard stuff, and also became a huge Sam Shepard fan. I even kind of followed the footsteps of Sam Shepard. I kind of also follow the footsteps of James Dean, maybe Marlon Brando, but I follow the footsteps of those people. And when I started off following footsteps, it was because of my parents, because they follow the footsteps of Thomas Wolfe. But anyway, it's a long story. My story's a long story. There's the fair right here, you can see, pretty much, and there's Buc-ee's. So real quick, as I was saying, my parents follow the footsteps of Thomas Wolfe because they were in the Thomas Wolfe Society. Around about the same time as when I was at Paschal, John Templin was the drama teacher at Paschal High School, and I was in one of the auxiliary rooms. That's the room where you go into when you're between classes and you're waiting to get to the next class, and you go in and they call roll. You know, they're called like Ferris, Bueller, Ferris, Bueller, that kind of thing. That was the room I was in, and the principal came on. Of course, we didn't have someone named Ferris Bueller, but we could have, I don't know. The principal came online on the intercom, or somebody came online. Anyway, and they were like, we're doing a play called Look Homeward Angel, come to audition. And that's where I auditioned. I got Ben Gant, and the next thing you know, I got in the theater. So yeah, so our school, Paschal, decided to do Look Homeward Angel. And I showed up, I had jet black hair, leather jacket. I wanted to be a punk rock kind of star, basically like David Bowie or something. I wanted to be a rock star, but I thought the theater was interesting. So I was sitting there, and you know, I didn't have a guitar at that time. Later, I did get a guitar from the theater room later. But I thought, well, you know, let's give it a try. My friend Stephen Wesley was up for Ben Gant. He didn't get it. I ended up getting Ben Gant, and I was surprised I got Ben Gant, which was one of the leads. Never had done any other work. I got Ben Gant, everyone liked it, and then I did their UIL shows, and I even got Best Actor for playing the pilot in Good Woman of Szechuan. One of the years we almost went to state for UIL, so I did really good. Okay, that's all true stories. I did all the plays there. I was a big star, Paschal, whatever. Well, okay. Stephen didn't make it. Stephen Wesley. He ended up dying because a friend of mine who was in the rock band Lollipop decided to go driving drunk. And he speeded down this one road out in the middle by, I don't know, somewhere in Fort Worth. They all almost died. Eric ended up having to go to a hospital, having major problems with basically Memento. Have you ever seen the movie Memento? Where he can only remember that day. The Christopher Nolan film. He could only remember that day. The day of what happened. He can't form new memories because of the impact. They were going so quickly. And he was drinking and driving. So this is kind of an anti-drinking and driving thing. Stephen didn't make it. Stephen died.
Police reported ahead.
So he didn't make it. So Stephen not only didn't make it, but I don't even get into Stephen. Stephen was kind of a butthole. He was that guy that I told you when we were over there off Jennings in Fort Worth. There was a bar back there. Well, we showed up at a bar one time, and Stephen just like went up to this miserable drunk. It was this big old, huge drunk, beer drinking drunk guy at a bar, and he was with his girlfriend. Stephen Wesley was actually with his girlfriend. And I don't know what he said. It was like a couple of exchanges of words. And Stephen was just like, let's go outside. And Stephen wore this big ring. Think of The Outsiders. You ever seen Coppola's Outsiders? And Stephen was kind of what you call a social, right? Because I was more of a punk, kind of new wave punk guy. But I hung out with him a little bit. So I hung out with everybody. So Stephen, just nailed this guy right here in the forehead. Blood just spurted everywhere. So we all jumped in my car, or somebody else's car. That's right. We all jumped in somebody else's car, and they drove off. And this guy just hurled this beer bottle way in the air, beer flying everywhere, trying to get it into our car. It wasn't the only time beer bottles have been thrown in my car. And we made it away and stuff, because all his biker friends or something was going to go after Stephen. Stephen was a real weird guy. He had kind of a temper. He had some problems. He was a pretty miserable alcoholic in high school. They didn't make it. So, Lacombe and Angel got a lot of attention. We passed out flyers all over the neighborhood. We got a full house almost every night. And Channel 11 came in and interviewed us. I remember at the time when I was playing Ben Gant, I had read some books on the Actor Studio. And I had known, or I've heard, that actors did this thing where they would think about memories and use memories from their past to affect their behavior on stage. And I started exploring that in Lacombe and Angel. But the major problem was at that time was that you have to mix that with what's called relaxation. So like when you first start off, you're doing all this memory stuff, emotional recall, but you're not trained on the relaxation part and imagination too. So imagination, which is like, you could do things like imaginary monologue, or you imagine talking to someone that you've known from the past. Those things that you constantly work on, so that when you step on stage, you're constantly, every step you take, everything that goes on, you're present in the moment with the other actors, but your imagination is active. So you're not using the same brain activity that you would in a normal situation. It's like if a painter is painting something, they're constantly imagining as they're painting with every brush stroke, so that it can get it right. And that is a lot of exercise and a lot of work. That's what the studio does. They exercise your imagination and they develop your emotions. And that way, you know that when if you watch a play, which I was watching one, YouTube is great because you can watch these plays on YouTube, and you're watching the actor and they're not doing the work. They're not imagining. They're not doing the emotional recall. They're not doing the step-by-step, moment to moment, are not present. They're not really talking to the people. They're not really listening. They're not there as if the first time. Then they're not doing the play. They're reading the lines and posing. So what the studio helped us start to do was first to relax. So it starts with the face, right? And then the body follows the face in relaxation. These things right here are where you can start, right, to relax. And then the imagination kicks in. Udo Hagen was great with having the actors see what was known as the fourth wall, the wall that the audience can't really see, because on the other side of that wall is a world they look into. Whether they really look at the audience or not is fine, because they could be doing Brecht. But that's where they start to paint and use their imagination. When you become an actor, you have to protect that. The only way, because anybody can be trained to be an actor. Some are more talented than others. Some are more gifted. But anybody, they don't need a genius. Brando was a genius, but they don't need one, because they can exercise their imagination and do scene by scene work. Imagination, Stanislavski's stuff. You're working on motivation, working on, think of the 6 steps with Uta Hagen, who you are, what you want, what's your objective, how do you get over the objective, what's your history, right? What's your circumstances? And then they start to work on that. They can even write while they're doing it. They can journal, they can imagine. Rehearsals is a time to imagine. And you start exercising your imagination. So when you see an actor walk out on stage that has exercised their imagination for 20 years, it's different than one that just does commercials, right? So the theater is there to exercise that imagination. Like, there's a difference between Robert Shaw and a guy doing AT&T commercials, okay? I think Robert Shaw was a novelist because he exercised his imagination being a novelist. Robert Shaw was a novelist. He was an author. He was a writer. And he was in Jaws. But he could exercise his imagination. And he could be there and see the shark. For real. He could really see it. So they're a little different than other people. They're not the same as your average Joe, because they're constantly messing with their memories, emotional recall. They're going into their minds as they step out, because that's what you want to see. You don't want to see a person just memorize the lines and walk out and pose and say their lines. These people do it moment to moment. They exercise things. It takes time. So New York does this, Actor Studio. And that's what James Dean sought after. And that's what James Dean did. If you watch James Dean, he's doing that. This is what Strasberg wanted people to do. Same with Meisner, same with Stella Adler, same with Uta Hagen, eventually came aboard, and she's passed too. But Uta Hagen would not stay in theater, or she stayed in theater, but she would not stay inside the theater if that's what she saw, which was a person standing there posing, saying the lines. She'd leave. Or even if they did do the work, but they anticipated, or you could see the work, she'd just leave. She'd go to the play, she'd sit down, and she could start to see the work. She'd get up and she'd leave. Now, Uta Hagen would sit there with her cigarettes, and she'd pick it apart. I've seen her classes, H&B Studios. She'd pick you apart, scene by scene. Matthew Broderick, great stage actor, worked with Uta Hagen. My teacher, Ken Stilson, worked with Uta Hagen. And she was somewhat method. They said that she was somewhat method. But she'd pick you apart and say, no, I can see the work. I don't want to see the work. I want to see something happening as if it's the first time. How do you do that? You try not to go crazy. Because if someone's behind the wall, what James Dean told Dennis Hopper, and this is a true story, Dennis Hopper, he was just doing almost like, not line readings per se, but, you go and look at The Giant, you can see a big difference between Dennis Hopper and James Dean. Because Dennis Hopper didn't have as much training with Strasberg probably as James Dean, or wasn't as maybe as gifted. So Dennis Hopper got, like kind of not angry, he's like, oh, how he does it is like, I don't know, man, like, how's he doing that, man? Like, what's going on, man? This is crazy. It looks like he's doing it the first time, man. But he talked with James Dean, and James Dean just said, look, if you're really going to smoke a cigarette, then really smoke it. There's a dog barking, whatever. But if you're really going to smoke a cigarette, really smoke the cigarette. Don't pretend like you're smoking, just smoke the cigarette. That's kind of what he was trying to tell Dennis Hopper. Dennis Hopper goes, okay, I see what you're saying. Just to really smoke the cigarette, I got it. And so then he tells him, he says, if someone's behind the door with a gun, then the person is really behind the door with the gun. Because that does something to you. If you're in a play and there's someone, like, let's say after you, and they have a gun and they're behind the door, and you know that they're behind the door, you're not going to stand on stage the same way you would. You're not going to be there in the room the same way you would if they were really behind the door and the gun, they're going to kill you. Something's going to happen to you, right? It's going to affect you. So that's what when he was talking to James Dean was telling me it's really happening. I mean, James Dean got in trouble. I mean, he like really choked a guy on set. They had to pull him off and stuff. He would really get into it. In Rebel Without a Cause, they had to pull him off, this one actor. He was really choking him. And they're like, wait, but because you lose yourself in it. That's what people want to see. Are you guilty of anything because of that? So you have to go against the grain of what society wants you to be as a person, and you're kind of a nut in a way because you're imagining the crap out of things. So you got to be careful. You got to be careful. Carrie got lost and thought he was Andy Kaufman and all this weird stuff. He went to Spielberg and started talking about Jaws and all this weird thing. But I'm saying that you got to play, and it's got to be like a serious thing. That's what I guess you could say what makes it kind of method. Harmon Dobbs had a dream. Harmon Dobson had a dream. He wanted to create a two-handed burger. He wanted the burger to fit in two hands, and his dream came true. So today we're dealing with about 97 Fahrenheit. It just dropped one digit.